The Rubik's clock is easily the strangest WCA event. Not only is it not a cube, but it also hasn't even been produced by Rubiks since it was invented in the 80s. So it might be surprising to learn that up until the year 2020, this original model of clock from the 80s was still the go-to choice for speed solving. If you went to a cubing competition at the beginning of 2020, which coincidentally I did, you would have seen all the top competitors using Rubik's brands. Even though you couldn't buy them new anymore, there just wasn't any great alternative. But all of that changed in the middle of 2020, when QiYi released their fully magnetic clock. Not only did it have magnetic pins, which many people had modded their Rubik's brands to add, but the actual clock faces also snapped into place with over 200 individual magnets. This made the puzzle turn infinitely better. In fact, it turned so much better that at my last few cubing competitions, I have seen literally 0 Rubik's brands. It has gone from ubiquitous to pretty much non-existent in under 3 years, replaced entirely by the QiYi clock. And you know what? Even though I appreciate the improvement in technology, I think it's a bit of a shame that this puzzle has gone out of fashion so quickly. So in this video, I want to get the best of both worlds and revive the classic look of the Rubik's clock without sacrificing the performance of the QiYi. That's right, I'm going to take my QiYi clock and make it look indistinguishable from a Rubik's brand. Well, okay, I'm not going to do it with my clock. Instead, I bought another one to mod. So let's do a quick little clock unboxing here. And it looks the same as the other one. What a surprise. Comes with a nice little stand in the box, and there you go. So now the question is, how on earth do you make a QiYi clock look like a Rubik's brand? Well, it's complicated because there are a lot of little differences between the two. But I think the best way to start is to take both of these puzzles apart. Now the QiYi clock is pretty easy to disassemble. You just find the side with the screws on it and then unscrew all 4 screws. And now the opposite face of the clock should lift up very easily, just like that. Unfortunately though, it's not quite as easy to take apart the Rubik's clock. In fact, if you're doing it for the first time, you actually have to break this plastic seal and then tape it back together at the end. Fortunately for me though, that means all I have to do is remove this tape to get it apart. So now that we're inside, you can see that one of the biggest differences between the appearance of these two puzzles is this paper insert on the Rubik's brand, which basically just tells you what direction to align the clocks. As you can see, all of that information is just embedded into the plastic on the QiYi, and if we go ahead and remove it from the Rubiks, these two puzzles start to look a lot more similar. Now unfortunately, the inserts from the Rubik's clock don't fit very well onto the QiYi clock. There are a few differences in dimensions, namely the clocks are much smaller than on the Rubiks. But if we want to make this look like a Rubik's brand, we're definitely going to have to make some custom inserts for it. I think the best strategy is going to be to scan these in. There's also a different design on the other side, and then modify all the dimensions on a computer so that we can then print them out and have them fit on the QiYi. I definitely have seen people at competitions who have made their own custom inserts for the QiYi clock with all sorts of fancy designs, so it definitely should be possible. I'm just not sure if anyone has done it before for the Rubik's brand design. So that's step 1. And the next step is pretty similar. We need to get the actual clock faces to look identical as well. Now fortunately, you don't have to understand how the mechanism works. All you need to know is that there's 2 types of clock pieces. There's the corners, which have different colors on each side, and the rest of the pieces, which are just single colored. So step 2 is going to be to take the QiYi clock faces and make them look like the Rubik's clock faces. I think it'll be pretty simple. I'm going to do it the same way as the inserts, so just scan in the design of the Rubiks, change up the dimensions a little bit, and then print them out and stick them onto these. I think the easiest way will be to print the designs on some sticker paper. That way we can attach them directly onto the pieces. The print quality might not be quite as good, but it should be super convenient. So between copying the clocks and copying these inserts, it's going to involve a lot of Photoshop work and a lot of precise cutting, especially cutting out all these little holes. But I think with a knife and some scissors, we should be able to make it work. Okay, now after those 2 steps, there are still a few more finishing touches we need to add. For one thing, if you look at the empty body of each clock, as you can see, the Rubiks is completely black, whereas the QiYi is half white. So even once we add those inserts, you'll still be able to see this strip of white going all the way around the puzzle. Obviously, we don't want that, so we're gonna have to spray paint this entire white piece black. Shouldn't be too big of a deal. And the final big difference are the pins, the parts that you push up and down to make different clocks turn. Once again, we want to get the QiYi pin to look just like the Rubik's pin. Now you can ignore these magnets because I glued them on myself. They're actually embedded inside the pin on the QiYi. And I think what we're gonna have to do is, number 1, cut down the QiYi pins a little bit because they're actually a little bit taller than the Rubik's ones. Number 2, spray paint the white part so that it'll be black on both sides, just like the Rubiks. And then number 3, add a little yellow cap on either side. The yellow cap is obviously gonna be a little bit tricky, but I think I can 3D print something to be the exact right color, shape, and size, and then glue them onto the end of the QiYi. So just to review, we gotta design and cut out our own custom inserts, design and stick on some matching clock faces, spray paint some pieces, cut some stuff down, 3D print some custom caps for the pins, and then put everything together. So let's go ahead and start this time lapse. Alright, we've got custom inserts, we've got custom clock faces, we've got everything that was white painted black, at least everything you can see from the outside. We've even got these really nice yellow caps for the pins to make them look just like the Rubiks brand. So let's start putting things together. We can start with the plastic casing, followed by one of these inserts. And once this is in, we can also put the black body piece right on top, followed by the actual clock pieces. Once all those are in, we can add the 4 pins into their spots. Then we take the other body piece and stick it on until everything snaps into place. We can add the other insert on top, and then the final plastic piece so that we can get everything screwed together. And here it is. Doesn't it look incredible? Well, if you've never seen an unmodified Rubik's clock before, then you might not have much to compare it to. So here's a short clip of what mine looked like before adding magnets. So pretty impressive, right? I don't think you could possibly make this thing look any more like a Rubik's brand. Here's a side-by-side comparison with my magnetic one. And as you can see, the only real difference is the size of the clock faces is a little bit smaller on this one. Obviously, there are also some slight differences in color because printing is hard. But besides that, the designs are as close as you can get to identical. And as you can see, the backside looks very good as well. If anything, the colors on mine look a little bit brighter and less faded, so I'm perfectly happy with that. Obviously, there are some slight imperfections in the cutting if you look really close up, but you'd never really notice it while solving. Moving over to the side of the puzzle, the spray painted black plastic looks indistinguishable from the original, so that worked out great. Technically, you can still see a bit of white on the inside right there, but that's just a tiny nitpick. And finally, the one part that I'm not 100% happy with are the pins. Don't get me wrong, they look amazing. I don't think I could have possibly made them look any more like the original. The only problem is, I cut them down to make them the same size as the Rubiks, but I didn't consider why QiYi had longer pins in the first place. And the reason is, these pins actually travel further than the Rubiks pins, which means when they're sticking up, they're sticking further up, and when they're sticking down, they're further down. So by making them shorter, I actually made it so that when they're down, they're actually lower than the surface of the puzzle itself, which is obviously not ideal. Normally they'd be sticking up just a little bit like this. So because of that, the pins have a bit of an awkward feel because you can't really tell where they are when they're down. That was totally my fault for not considering the mechanism. I tried fixing it by adding some little washers in, like in the Rubik's clock, to make them not travel as far. But again, because the mechanism is designed differently, it just didn't work out. So we're gonna have to live with some awkward pins on this puzzle. But you guys have stared at it for long enough. I think it's finally time for the moment of truth. How does it turn? And I will say, it turns almost as well as the original QiYi clock. Obviously, it's going to turn a little bit worse because we painted a bunch of pieces. We now have a bunch of paper rubbing against a bunch of plastic. But with all that considered, I'd say it still turns very well, and it's certainly the best clock in the world that looks like a Rubik's brand. Now, I guess the best thing I can do to show off the turning is to solve it. So let's go ahead and scramble it up real quick and show you a quick solve. Okay, this is the one WCA event that I literally always hand scramble, so hopefully I didn't make it too easy. And there we go, we have a nice case on this side. 3, 2, 1, and go. Of course, we first got to get the cross on one side, get that facing up to 12, flip it over, totally forgot what my pin order is that I was learning, get the cross on the other side, and then just match up all the corners like so. That wasn't the fastest clock solve in the world, but I think you get the idea. I'd say my really well broken in main QiYi clock turns maybe 50% better, whereas this thing turns easily 5 times better than my best Rubiks brand. This thing is just garbage compared to this one. But I think we can all agree that this is the absolute perfect combination if you want the looks of the Rubiks and the performance of the QiYi. I hope you all enjoyed the journey of making it along with me, but that's pretty much it, and I'll see you guys next time.